Things come when we least expect it. Familiar? God's timing is perfect. Stop expecting and start trusting in God. So a few days ago, I had the desire to try out watercolors for myself. But this desire came with a very significant difficulty because I have a preference to use heavier mediums such as oil pastels. So because of this, using watercolors was not exactly an easy feat for me and oftentimes ended with me becoming irritated and giving up. But the desire did not relent. The desire did not die and was still there, even though I had the inclination of giving up because of this difficulty that hindered me from freely enjoying it. I wanted to learn more about using watercolors and what I prefer when using them. I wanted to see different styles from different artists just so I could gain a preference as to what kind of artwork am I producing with the medium watercolor. I wanted to try out different techniques and different stuff that I could do with watercolors. Okay, anyways, coincidence or not, a few days later that desire had taken root inside of me, my teacher had offered to hand me over some of his old art books and art supplies. Now, this didn't actually immediately register into my brain until I started evaluating where I was at just a few hours ago. Right after he dropped off the books and supplies that he offered, I realized that this wasn't just merely a coincidence, but rather God's perfect timing. Now, of course, some people may be skeptical and say that this would just be a coincidence, but the desire of me wanting to try out watercolors was just an innocent desire. And my teacher's offer could have made a more significant meaning. It might be God's way of speaking through people that I know around me to continue working with watercolors and not just giving up. The reason why I say this is because my teacher may have offered to give me some of his art books and art supplies, but he never really did check the boxes and what type of content would be inside the 3 containers that he handed over to me. He never really knew if there was watercolor inside. He never really checked if the books inside those containers would contain tutorials on how to use watercolor. Now, I was surprised to find out that the contents in those boxes contained at least 10 sets of watercolors and a handful of brushes that I could use while using watercolors, and also a color palette that I very much needed because I don't have a palette to work with. So imagine my surprise. Everything was perfect in God's timing. Some of the contents in those boxes also contained art books, art history books, and other art supplies that I could meddle with and use in the future. And because of that, I know exactly what it was, and it was God's perfect timing. Not only did my teacher offer to hand me over his art supplies and art books just at least days after I had the desire of working with watercolors, the things that were handed down to me just so happened to be the perfect sort of things that I was looking for in order to continue on my art journey. And because I never expected anything to actually be handed down over to me, or I never really expected for anything to happen today, this was a blessing. I know that this was a blessing and is indeed a blessing because it made me realize a few things. When we pray to God, we always have this sort of expectation that things should happen to us instead of just trusting God. Oftentimes we forget that we should believe in God and His will and not just expect for anything else in return. Oftentimes we seek control or to-do list, or when I'll do this, when I'll do that, when will I buy this, schedules and endless due dates. Things that require control. But we always must remember that it depends on God's will and His timing, because He knows when and what to give us and what we need in the right time. Things that can actually serve our growth in God's journey. Now, how does this exactly connect to me and my watercolors? Well, for one, watercolors aren't directly connected to God in a way, but they can be used to serve God if I produce artworks that spread His greatness or spread His joy, or things that can represent God and draw people to actually believe or be curious about God, basically leading people to God. Sometimes the things that we think about in our head aren't just actually thoughts, but they are forms of prayers. Those were the words spoken to me by the same teacher who has handed me down his art supplies and art books. Trusting in God's perfect timing can actually save you from a lot of irritation. For example, I mentioned that I had an inclination or preference to use heavier art mediums such as oil pastels. And of course, because of this, I also have the desire to try out oil paints. I have used them before, maybe once, but I do know that they take a very, very long time to dry, and that they are very difficult to work with because of that fact. They also do require a number of trial and error, meaning that I would have to purchase a sustainable amount of oil paints for me to practice and improve on using oil paints as an art medium. I want to try oil paints, but right now, and where I'm at right now, they are too expensive for me to afford them. And if I buy them now, I risk the possibility of my family going deeper into poverty because they are my source of income. And right now, as I am entering into college, I can focus on saving money for college. And who knows, once I finish, I might be able to afford oil pastels later. And I won't be left on a cliffhanger when I do need them because I am able to afford them. I would be saved from irritation. When I paint, I like to use a large amount of white, and usually I would end up buying 2 tubes or 3 tubes of white just by using acrylic paints. By the way, I don't use oil paints, I can't afford them yet, but you get my point. To finish one painting, I would need at least 3 tubes of white paint or more. Now imagine, since oil paints are more expensive, and who knows how many tubes I would consume and would need to finish just one piece of painting. That would definitely have made me irritated in a sort of way because I am left with a cliffhanger and would definitely want to finish the painting early or as soon as possible. But patience is a virtue, and I must always remember that. And again, God's timing is perfect, so He knows that it is not my time yet, but instead I have to be patient. Plus, even if I did end up not affording oil paints, then it would still be alright because I would still have a variety of art mediums to choose from to continue serving the Lord. Serving the Lord doesn't just come in one font. It can come in many different fonts, or rather, in my case, art mediums. So today's lesson is, don't expect and just trust in God's timing, because whatever you have in mind or the plans that you have for your life, He will always have a greater plan for you. He has perfect timing. God's timing is perfect, and He knows what and when to give you. Stop expecting and start trusting in God.